Come with me as I take you through the process on how I achieve my notch collar jacket or blazer. In this tutorial video today, I'm going to be sharing with you the easiest and the most detailed method on how you can achieve a neatly finished notched collar jacket or blazer. If you have not watched the drafting aspect of this video where I use freehand method to achieve this beautiful blazer, kindly follow the link in the description box to get straight to the video. Greetings everyone and welcome to my channel. So I've gone ahead to iron paper stay on this, and I went ahead to join this accordingly, ironing my seam line open. I did this for the lining and for the main fabric. After ironing my paper stay, I joined the pieces together and I ironed my seam line open. I also did this for the back pieces as well. I'm going to place my fabric on the lining right side facing right side, and I'm going to go ahead to join the two pieces together on the down part straight up. Now I'm going to take the front pieces as well. I'll take a lining piece that aligns with the front part, place it right side facing right side, and I'm going to go ahead to join the pieces together starting from the top part all the way to the down part, and I'll repeat the same thing for the second piece of the front part. So after joining the down part, I flipped it to the right side and I ironed this down. So next thing to do, you're going to take your pins and you are going to pin this on the neckline and on different angles, and as you pin, you arrange your lining in it very well, and any excess you see at the side after arranging and pinning this up, you are going to cut this out. But please make sure that you have arranged this very well and ensure you are cutting out only the excess lining. So this is it for the back piece. So now I'll take the front piece and I'm going to pin it up as well and trim out the excess lining like we did for the back part. To join up the shoulders, you are going to place this fabric to fabric and you are going to sew this straight up, and when you sew this, you're expected to stop where the back neck width stops, and you join the lining using the same method you use in joining the fabric. I'll use the same method to join the second shoulder part of the jacket. So when you are done joining, it is expected to be separate. To join the sides, first thing to do is to ensure that the length of your jacket for the front and back is very equal. Now to join this, you are going to place this sewing only the fabric to the fabric. You are going to start stitching from the up part, taking in your 1-inch sewing allowance all the way to the down and into the lining, taking in your 1-inch sewing allowance. I'm going to repeat the same process when joining the second side of the jacket. So when you are done joining the sides using the method I explained, the inner finishing is expected to look neatly like this. I'll use the same method to join the second side of the jacket. So after joining the sides, you are going to take the lining piece at the armhole and you make sure that the notch point of the lining sits with the notch point of the main fabric and you pin it up at that point. You also pin the side seam of the lining and the side seam of the fabric together, but ensure that you have trimmed out your sewing allowance to be left with 1/2 inch before you can go ahead to pin this up. Next, you are going to pin the lining and the fabric together at the shoulder point on the neckline like this, and you do the same pinning on the second armhole point of the jacket. So next thing to do, you place the two center point of the lapel together and you are going to come down by 1 inch. You can come down more than 1 inch if you want your lapel and notch point to be below more than mine. So you mark it out like so and you connect it to the back neck like this. Before you cut this out, to make sure you are cutting it evenly, you pin it up like so before you can go ahead to cut it out. At this point, you are going to decide how deep you want your notched collar to be, and for me, I want mine to be 1.5 inches away from the front center. So I'll go ahead to measure 1.5 inches. I'm going to notch it at the two lapel points. So next, you are going to go to the neckline, the back center of the neckline, and you also pin it up at that point. Next, you are going to take your fabric to a working table, and on the back neckline, you are going to come down by 1 inch and connect it to the with a curve to the shoulder like this. To be able to get a unique and even curve, you place it on fold. I'll just pin up my pin straight up to let me place this on fold. I'm going to go ahead to cut it out following the curve after placing it on fold like so. So after cutting this out, I'll go ahead to measure my total neck width, and this is what we are going to be using to cut out the collar, and mine is 14.5. I'll go ahead to measure 14.5 on my collar stay. I'm going to add 1 inch for sewing allowance. I'm going to cut a height of 5 inches, and I'm going to go ahead to cut this out following the width and the height. Next, I'll place it on fold and pin this up to make sure it stays firm. I'm going to go ahead to make sure the real collar width without adding any allowance. Mark it at the up and the down. Connect the two mark points together. Next, I'll be marking a height of 3 inches for the collar like this, and I'm going to connect these 2 points straight up. At the open part, which is the front, I'm going to go up by 1 inch and I'm going to connect it. Connect these points to the back center with a curve like this. Take note, my curve did not go all the way to the back center. So next, I'm going to be measuring my notched width. Remember, I use 1.5 inches as my notch width. So I'm going to go ahead to measure 1.5 inches from this point inward. I'm going to connect it to the collar height like so. On this collar height point, I would also measure 1.5 inches. I'm going to connect it to the back collar like this. Following my marked out point, I'll go ahead to cut this out exactly. Just go ahead to cut it exactly. Okay, so when I'm done, I'm going to unpin this and I'm going to blend in the top part of the collar, and so I will not mistake the up part as the down part. I'll notch the down part of the collar. I have ironed the collar gum on the wrong side of my fabric. On the other fabric, I ironed stay on it. I'm going to be placing this right side facing right side, but before then, I'll just give this a rough cutting. Place this together, and to avoid it squeezing or shrinking, I'm going to pin this all up before I go ahead to sew this. And when you sew this, make sure you follow the exact shape of the collar without top stitching on the collar. Just sew out the exact shape of the collar, do not top stitch on it. So I'll go ahead to cut this out, and when you are cutting the down part, add a sewing allowance of 0.5 inches as you cut this out. Do well to cut out the edges of the collar like this before you go ahead to flip it to the right side, and you push it out very well to get a very pointed collar tip. After turning it out, I went ahead to iron it. I'll place this on fold and notch the center of my collar. I'll mark out the sewing allowance I added to the collar. I will unpin the pins I use in holding it at the neckline, and I'm going to place my collar on the back neck center on just the fabric. You are sewing on just the fabric, and the right side of your collar should be facing you. You pin it up at that point, and you also pin it up at your notched point in your front part. You also do that for the other end. Please ensure you pin it up to avoid any shortage. You are pinning it up at the notch point, and you are also following your sewing allowance you added. So I'm going to go ahead to sew this on just the fabric. Following my sewing allowance I added, I'll go ahead to sew this straight up. Make sure you arrange this as you sew so that you do not have any squeeze or any folds on your main fabric when you are done joining. After joining, you go ahead to trim out the excess and you clip it all around the neckline. To finish the collar neatly, you are going to go in through the armhole and flip this to the wrong side of your jacket. Pin the lining to the back center of the already sewn collar, and you are going to sew this following your first stitch line from the front center all the way to the other end. Make sure you arrange this very well so that you will not have any squeeze, and do well to clip the shoulder point like this to free out the seam a bit. So this is what it should look like when you are done. Do well to also push out your lapel point out to give a very sharp look like so. On the armhole part, you go ahead to pin up the lining and the main fabric together to make it stable. Measure the circumference of your armhole, as this measurement is what you'll be using to cut out your sleeve cap. I've gone ahead to cut out fabric for my sleeve measurement and of desired length. I'm going to be measuring out what I got as my armhole circumference on this point. I'll be using the closed part of the sleeve as the sleeve center and the open part as the side. I'll come down from the side by 4 inches, connect it to the top with a slanted line, get the midpoint and make a curve like so and like so. Measure my armhole circumference and add 1 inch. Measure my actual sleeve circumference, measure the elbow point, and I'll connect this to my actual armhole measurement first. Add a 1-inch allowance and connect to the allowance at the armhole. Cut it out and notch the sleeve at the center. Join the sleeve, taking out the allowance on the main fabric separately and on the lining separately. Pin up the notch part of the sleeve to the notch part on the jacket and on the sides. Make sure you join the sleeve to sleeve and lining to lining. Then you go ahead to clip it all around when you are done. When you are done, you are going to pass your hand through the lining like this to be able to pull this to the right side of the jacket. You pass your hand through the sleeve of your jacket, and from that point you go ahead to pull the jacket to the right side of your jacket. When you pull this out, you notice that your sleeve lining is separate from the fabric sleeve. So you put your hand through the fabric sleeve and you pull out the lining to be underneath the fabric sleeve like so. I'll repeat this again. You put your hands through the material like the sleeve, the fabric part. You put your hands into it and you pick out the lining, making sure that it aligns with your main fabric. Then you go ahead to arrange your lining to sit very well and accordingly in your main fabric. Then you go ahead to top stitch the top part of your sleeve and your lining together. If you are not adding this fancy design I use, just go ahead to hem it up or use hand tacking to finish the sleeve hem so that your stitches will not be showing on the top part of your sleeve. But for mine, I went ahead to cut a band. The band is 5 inches wide and it is just as long as my sleeve circumference. I'll place it on fold like so, and I'm going to sew this straight up. After sewing it straight up, I'll place it on fold like this. I'm going to be sewing this all around to keep it together. Now place the side of this band on the side of my sleeve, pin this up, and I'm going to be sewing this on the right side of the fabric all around the sleeve circumference. When you are done sewing, you are going to flip this to the right side of your jacket to get this folded sleeve look. For the pocket, I've cut out 4 pieces of fabric. It is 5 inches wide and 4 inches long. I'm going to place 2 by 2 right side facing right side. I'm going to sew it all around. After sewing, I'll flip this to the right side and I'm going to top stitch it with a 1-inch sewing allowance for the both pockets. From the top of my jacket, I'm going to go ahead to measure my half length, which is 16 inches, and I'm going to take my pocket, trim out the excess I have at that point, notch the center of my pocket, and you should make sure that the center of your pocket is seated exactly on your dart line, and you are sewing it from the top part like this on your half length line. And when you are done top stitching, you flip it to the down and you top stitch on the pocket again to get this fancy pocket look. Using my manual machine, I've gone ahead to fix my buttonhole and I've also fixed the button. Now you need to give this a really good press on your lapel and on your collar to keep it flat. If you do not have a steam iron, sprinkle water on it and iron your lapel to stop at your desired break point. Good ironing is what you need to keep your lapel flat. You can also iron the inner part of your lining to give it a neat finish and to clear up all the rumples you got from turning it inside out. Thank you so much for watching, guys. See you.